Join me as we learn Chumash for Friday, the sixth Torah reading of Parshas Beha'aloscha, chapter 10, verse 35. Today we're going to encounter in the Torah something unique that there is nowhere else in the Torah, a letter that is placed upside down on two sides, making like a bracket on one section of the Torah. This section, even according to some opinions in the Talmud, is considered a Torah for itself. However, Rashi will explain to us the purpose of why these brackets are placed here. Verse 35. And it was whenever the ark traveled, was set out, Moshe would say, Kuma Hashem v'yafutza ivecha, arise, O God, may your enemies be scattered, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, and may those who hate you flee from you. Rashi, verse 35. Vayihi b'nesaya Aaron, osa simoniyes, osa le simoniyes mulfanav al-malachraf. If you look in the Torah, you'll see like brackets, a nun upside down or backwards, before it and after these two verses. Loimar, to tell you that this is not the actual spot of where Vayihi b'nesaya should be. So, if so, why is it placed here? To be able to make an interruption between one negative event and another negative event. As it says, we will see what the negative events was before when they traveled for the 3 days that they wanted to meet, and then we're going to see the different events that happened during the Jewish people's complaining while they were in the desert. Kuma Hashem, he would be caused, the ark would go before the Jewish people by a 3-day distance. Moshe would say, Moshe would say, get up and stand, wait for us, don't go too far. This is what it says by Midrash Tanchuma in Vayakel. What does it mean that your enemies should scatter? These are the enemies that come against the Jewish people, that they gather together to hurt the Jewish people. That's what he says, that they should scatter. And those that hate us should flee from you. What that is referring to, Eila Reitvim. Those are those that come, not only that gather to plot against the Jewish people, but those that actually try to advance and to come against the Jewish people, they should flee. Misan Echa, your enemies. Is there anybody that, how can it be somebody, God's enemies? What's he referring to here? Elu Seine Yisrael. These are the enemies of the Jewish people. Shekol Seines Yisrael, whoever hates the Jews, Seines Mishamar Vayolam, hates indeed God, because God chose the Jewish people. Shenemer, as it says in Tehillim, Umisan Echa Nosureish, that from your enemies they try to bring sacrifice, they try to create leadership or be able to show that they're great. Mihaim, who are God's enemies, as he continues in Tehillim there, Al Amcha Yerimu Soid, those that try to plot against the Jewish people. Verse 36, Ubenuchai, and when the ark came to rest, Yoimar, Moshe would say, Shuva Hashem Riveves Alpha Yisrael, repose, O God, amongst the myriads of thousands of Israel. Shuva Hashem, rest, repose. Menachem ben Tzruk explains, Tirgim Eloshem Argoya, like to rest. V'chein b'shuva v'nachas tivashein, like we see in Isaiah, it says that with rest and with, if you do what God says, your salvation will come in a calm, in a nice way. Riveves Alpha Yisrael, what is the number? Riveves is means of a number of like 10,000. Magid over here, it tells us, this teaches us that the Torah Shechina, the divine presence, doesn't rest amongst the Jewish people when there's less than 22,000 people. And that's when there's a special blessing that's made and so on. Chapter 11, verse 1, we now continue with the incident that happened in the place called Tavera. And it was when the people continued to complain and be evil in God's ears. Vayishma Hashem, and God heard, Vayicharapai, and God got upset up then, and he became angry. Vativar bam eish Hashem, and a fire from God broke out amongst them. Vatoichal b'ktzei hamachane, and it consumed the extreme parts of the camp. What that means, we'll soon see in Rashi different interpretations of what this is about. Ein ha'am ela l'rishayim. When it uses a terminology without saying the Jewish people, it just says plain the nation. It's referring to the evil people of the Jewish nation, and that's why it doesn't call them the Jews, because they weren't acting appropriately. So too we see later on, when Moshe cries to God, Ma esalam azeh, what should I do with these people? It also says later in Jeremiah, this bad nation, however, when they are doing what's proper, Kriyim Ami, they're called my nation. Like God says, Shalach Ami, send my nation. Ami Masisalach, what did my nation do? So when we do the right thing, we're God's nations. When we don't do the right thing, God forbid, we're the nation. Kimis Einanim, like complainers. Emis Einanim Elalosh Nalila. The word misayninim means that they're libelous. They're coming up with complaints. They're looking for excuses of how they can go away from what God told them to do. So too we find the same terminology by Shimshon in the book of Judges. They're looking for excuses, and the same terminology, same root word, as well. Meaning not that they were like whispering what they were doing wrong, but they made their complaint known, Shira, which is bad, they were trying to intimidate or say things which would anger God. And what was their argument? Amru, they said, Oy lanu, woe is to us, kamal batnu, look how hard we worked, baderech hazeh, on this way. We traveled for 3 days, such a painful long trip. And this was the first complaint, as we mentioned previously, that we said there were two complaints that they had. Number one was when they went in Vayisu, when they traveled from the mountain. The word Vayisu, the Talmud explains that they traveled away from the mountain of God, meaning that they traveled away from God. That was the first complaint of their complaint of how the road or the difficulty in travel. So God said, I wanted you should travel right away for 3 days because I wanted you to come into the land of Israel right away. And you're complaining for the good that I did for you. What does it mean at the edge of the camp? It's referring to those people that were distant, meaning that they were at the edge, they were the people at the extreme end. They weren't from the popular people, or they were the people that they were always at the cuff of things and making problems on the side. Referring to the Erev Rav, which were the multitude of nations that came along with the Jewish people. They were not real converts. They only were afraid of what was going to happen, and therefore they wanted to join along. And every so often, they're the ones that are making the problems as time comes. Rav Shimon ben Manasseh explains what does it mean b'ktzei machane. On the opposite, the word katzin, which means generals, also comes from the word katzeh, that the ones that were complaining were from the ministers and the more important people, and therefore they were worthy that they should be punished for such type of behavior. Verse 2. And the people cried out to Moshe. And Moshe prayed to God. And the fire that was consuming them stopped, subsided. This is like an example of a king of flesh and blood who gets upset at his son that did something wrong. So the son goes to the friend of the father and he tells him, please go ask my father that he should have mercy on me. So too over here the Jewish people saw that God was upset, and because of that a fire came out and was consuming people, and therefore who did they go to? They went to Moshe and say, come on, you're friendly with God and please pray for us. That means it was put out and it subsided and it went back to one of the sides, the where it came from, to that outside the camp. That it was like folding up and moving away and burning anything that was on its way on that whole side of from where the wind came from and where the fire came from. Therefore Moshe called that name of that place Tav'era, a blaze, because for a fire of God is broken out amongst them there. Verse 4. Now the incident, that was the first incident of the complaining of the Jewish people. Here we come to the second negative event that happened as well. Although only a few of the mixed multitudes were still amongst the Jewish people, because many of them already participated in the previous incident, and therefore there were still a few, and therefore he calls them over here ha'asafsuf, the mixed multitude amongst the Jewish people. Asher bikirbai, that was amongst the Jewish people, his avu tava, they began to have strong cravings. Vayashuvu vayivku, and they sat down and they began to cry. Gam b'nei Yisrael, and this caused also that the Jewish people should as well become to cry. Vayebru, and they said, Mi achilenu basar, who will feed us meat? Rashi, v'asafsuf, the Eid of Rav. These are the people of the Eid of Rav, the multitude of the Egyptians that were amongst the Jewish people. Shenesfu aleim uses asafsuf, means that they gathered with them, but when they left Egypt. Vayeshuvu, what does it mean they returned? They went back. Gam b'nei Yisrael, that meaning the Jewish people joined them. Vayifku imam, and they cried together with these Eid of Rav people. Why were they complaining about meat? They didn't have any meat. Doesn't it say that the multitude of people went with them and they brought cattle, sheep, goat, they have everything with them. So they could have went and slaughtered their animal and they have what to eat. The imtaim, if you're going to say a chalum, they ate it already. But we find later on in chapter 32 when the people of Gad and Menashe come along to Moses and they say that we have so much cattle that we want to stay on this side of the Jordan. Ella, what was going on over here? They're looking for excuses to go back to Egypt. And therefore they were making excuses and complaints, libels, things that really have no substance to it. Because if they really wanted meat, they could have went and slaughtered their animals. What's their complaint? They continue. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free. The cucumbers, and the watermelons, and the leek, and the onions, and the garlic. They're saying all the things that they remembered that they had in Egypt. That they ate in Egypt free. Since when they ate it free? They were working as slaves. Rashi says. Yeah, you're going to say that what does it mean that the Egyptians gave them free? If they didn't give them the straw, if they didn't give them straw for free, do you think they gave them fish for free? So why are the Jewish people saying free fish? So what does it mean over here free? They were able to eat without being obliged to doing any commandments. The word chinam meaning that they didn't have to give anything of their fish, they didn't have to give any tithing, that they didn't have any other side issues. They just got when they ate what they wanted and did what they wanted. It's like Yishuyim, the cucumbers. Amar Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says, that the manna was able to change to any taste that a person wanted besides these things. The reason why these things the manna did not change to, because it is difficult, it can hurt women that are nursing. Because we find this, that we tell a woman who is nursing, do not eat garlic and onion because of the baby that's nursing. So too the sample for a king that it says in the Sifri that he gives to his son a nurse that helps bring up the children. And the king is telling him, don't give that food, and the king, because he cares for the grandchild. Meanwhile, the son's complaining, why can't we have that food? And he doesn't realize the consequences that may come from it. So too over here, God didn't give it to them because it may hurt the child. And what are they doing? Complaining, how come we can't have the things of those kind of things? Kishuim, Rashi gives us the translation of what they are. And in Old French, cucumbers, as we call it today in English. Avatichim is watermelons. In Old French, butikes. Hechatzir, karishin, which is leek. And in Old French, pulidish. We find it also in the Talmud, just butzina, alhamon. Next verse 6. But now they continued. Our soul, we are bored. There's nothing. Ein kel, there's nothing for us. The only thing that we have before our eyes is the manna. We have nothing else. We don't have more items on the menu. Rashi, elamonenenu, man b'shachar, man b'erev. They complain. We have man in the morning, man in the evening, but we want a little bit of a change of menu. Verse 7. V'hamon kizragad, and the man that they had, the manna was like a coriander seed. And its color was like of a crystal. Rashi, V'hamon kizragad. This is verses telling us about the quality of the man. This is not going on what the Jewish people complained. This is telling us about what the quality of the man. And he says as follows. Mi shamar zeh yamar zeh. The one that said the previous verse does not say this verse. Yisrael, the Jews were saying, Bilti Allah maninenu, the only thing we have is manna. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and God responds in the Torah, V'hamon kizragad. They're complaining about the manna. You know what the manna was like? It was coriander seeds. It had this idea. It was like a crystal. Look what these people are complaining about. And the manna was so important. It was round like this crystal. Zera colander, like the colander seeds. It's the name of a good stone, and in Belaz, like a crystal. Verse 8. Shatu ha'am. The Jewish people would have to then, the people could go and walk and gather it. And they ground it in a mill. Or they crushed it in a mortar. And then they can cook it in a pot. Also, they would make from it cakes. And the taste of it was ketam lishad hashamen, like a pastry that was moisture of oil. Rashi. Shatu, the word shatu, ein shayit ela loshin tiul. The word shayit means that they would go stroll, take a walk, and they were able to go. It wasn't difficult for them to go pick it up. V'tachnu b'rechayim, lo yored b'rechayim v'lebekteira v'lemedich, l'mishtana yitam l'tchoin l'mishalim. That means not that necessarily that they had to actually put it into was ready-made food. They didn't have to put it into a millstone or to grind it or to whatever it may be, but the taste changed according to what the person. You wanted it to taste like a cake, you wanted it to taste like ground, you wanted it to taste whatever you wanted it to taste like, that's what it was, and those were the choices. But porur kedera is in a pot. L'shad hashamen, l'chluach shel shemen. It had like a moisture or dampness of oil on it. That's the way Dunish ben Labrat, who was another one of the commentators of the grammatical language, who mentioned many times, Menachem ben Sruk, one of the other great people of grammar at the time that Rashi looked at it, was a fellow by the name of Dunish ben Labrat. And he says the following: he finds other places which are similar. That they find this in Tehillim from a prayer of David HaMelech that he says because of his great worries, it became so how it felt in the heat of the summer. The Lamed li, when they talk about li shad hashamen, is the foundation of the word, meaning it's part of the actual word. It's not like a prefix of the word itself. However, the rabbis give a different interpretation. The word loshin shadayim, that the word that the manna became like the breast that a child nurses from. The problem is, we don't find the concept of nursing when it comes to oil. And you cannot explain simply to say that that's what it means to the oil. Loshen vayishman yishurn shimkena yamim nokun komatz katan v'taimoy lemata tachsamem achshav shamem nokun b'pesach gadol hatam tachsashin l'shein shemenhum. So if you wanted to, maybe one would try to translate the word shemen, l'shad shemen, to say that comes from the word vayishman, that is shaman, that they became fatty because of the oil. But Rashi explains that based on the grammatical pronunciation of it, of where the vowels are placed, it would have to be a tseire, and over here we have a patach, and how it changes the word shemen to shaman, meaning that instead of it meaning oil, it should mean shaman, to get fattened, and that's Rashi negates that translation. And therefore, what does Rashi say? Vashin could become its gadol, but the way we have it over here is that shin has a shomen, like when oil, and therefore it doesn't have a small patach. Because it's at the end of a verse as well. You'll find any time that a word at the end of a verse will change from shamen to shomen, or it will always have a kamatz at the end of a word, like segol will change to kamatz. For example, you have it kesef would become kosef, like that nature. Davar acher, Another explanation of what this lashad can mean. Lashad can be also a word that's made up of many different letters. You take the word and and change it around. And it's actually an abbreviation. Lamed Shin Dalid. Layish Shemen Udvash. Telling us that this dough, this manna that they had, Ke'isa Nalusha B'Shem, was like a dough that was kneaded with oil, Uketufa B'Dvash, and is smeared with honey. V'targum Shalunk is the Metargum Dalish B'Mishcha, the Targum, who says Dalish, it was smeared with oil, is more similar to the grammatic translation that Dunish Ben Abrat explained, that it had a smearing of oil, than to the other one that it has an abbreviation, that it was a dough with oil smeared with honey. Verse 9. When the dew descended on the camp, Laila, at night, the manna would descend upon it as well. Vayishma Moshe, this was all telling us about how the manna would come, and as that the manna would come at night with the dew, making sure it wouldn't get dirty, and the uniqueness and specialty about the manna. Now going back to what the Jewish people were complaining about. Verse 10, Vayishma Moshe, Sama Moshe heard the people, weeping with their families, each person at the entrance of his tent. And God got really upset, became angry. And Moshe also considered it evil. Rashi, verse 10, Mishpachis. They were not crying on their own, in a proper, modest way, but it was families and families, Nessim and Beichem, were crying together, Lefarsim Terumasim, to be able to publicize their complaint against God Begoli. Rabbi Seinu Amr, the rabbis explained that this was also another problem that was happening there. They weren't only complaining about the meat in the menu, but they were complaining that they were given laws governing their promiscuity, that they were not allowed to, as we mentioned previously, that they were the laws pertaining of who they are allowed to marry and not. This was what they were upset about, because the Noachites did not have the detailed laws that the Jewish people have of who they were allowed to and not to marry. Verse 11. And God, Moses said to God, why have you treated your servant so badly? Why didn't I find favor in your eyes? That you placed the burden of this entire nation upon me. Verse 12. That I conceive all these people. That I give birth to them. That you're telling me, carry them in your bosom. Like a nursing woman carries a suckling. To the land, that you promised to your forefathers, to their forefathers. Rashi says, am I the one that gave birth to them that you're telling me that I have to carry them and take care of their problems? You may ask, when did God tell him this? Where did he tell him this? Because God told him in the book of Exodus, go and lead these people out. You told me you commanded the Jewish people, you take upon yourself to lead the Jewish people, even if it means that you're going to have to suffer from them, and without being upset at them. You're telling me I should carry them in my bosom, I should bring them to the land of Israel? This is what he's going back to when he tells them, how should I carry them? What should I do? Verse 13. Where do I have meat from? To give all these people. That they're crying to me, saying, give us meat. We should eat it. Verse 14. I cannot carry the responsibility of the entire people alone. Because it's too difficult for me. Verse 15. And if this is the way you're going to treat me, please kill me if I found favor in your regard. Why? Because I do not want to see the evil that happens. Rashi, Moshe, why does he use the terminology of a female terminology? Because over here, Moshe became weakened like a female. When Moshe saw the terrible punishment that God was ready to give the Jewish people, he became so weak that therefore it changes it to a female term. He didn't have the strength to say, how can you punish this? And he says, I can't tolerate this. I don't want to see this evil happen to them. But also should say in their bad. Why do you say in his bad? The Torah changed it. This is one of the places where the Torah changes it to be able to give it in a more respectful way. And that's why God actually diminished the punishment based on Moshe's request. By the very fact that Moshe said, I cannot carry the responsibility on my own, over here, therefore, God responds in verse 16. Moshe, and God says to Moshe, therefore gather to me, assemble for me 70 men. Israel, from the elders of the Jews. Asher that you know that they are elders, people's elders. And they are foremen, that they will enforce it. And you'll bring them to the tent of meeting. And they will stand there together with you. Rashi, Esvali. This is the response. Rashi says, you giving a response to your complaint. Shamarta, you said, I can't do it myself. But 1 second, wasn't there already 70 elders that he gathered in the land of Egypt? What happened to them? Where are those? I already had 70 helpers. Go and get those 70 elders. What happened was that they died. If you recall, the second opinion, what happened? When God got angry and the Jewish people that were complaining, why were they leaving and the travels was too hard for them? And who were the people that were complaining were the leaders, the generals amongst the Jewish people? Those were the 70 leaders that were killed as well. According to the other opinion as well, so it could be that they also died in the sin of the golden calf. And therefore they were worthy of it. Sinai, already from the time of Mount Sinai, others explain that these people were also killed by the fire that set out previously, only once they left Mount Sinai, because since by Mount Sinai it says that they saw God and they were eating and drinking, and they did not have the proper respect. However, God did not, and it was like disrespectful, a person seeing in front of the king and eating his lunch. Therefore, God said, I don't want to disturb the great event of the giving of the Torah. I'll wait until they travel. And over here, by this first event, that's when they died as well. These are the people that you know that they were made as foremen in the land of Egypt, and they cured for them, and because of that they were punished and they were hit by the Egyptians. That it says that the leaders of the foremen of the Jewish people were punished, were beaten. And now it's only right that the same way they suffered because of the Jewish people, they should be made leaders for the Jewish people and assist Moshe in his holy work. You will take them. How are you going to take them? Convince them, persuade them. How lucky you are that you were appointed to be God's the representatives for the Jewish people. They should stand there with you, so the Jewish people would see, and they will give them respect and honor. Look how lucky and look how special these people are that they went with Moshe to hear God's word. Verse 17. And I will go down and I will descend and speak with you there. And I will elevate them by taking from your spirit, that's upon you, and I will put it with you, and they will then carry with you, and the burden of the people, and you will not have to bear the burden on your own. Rashi, v'yoradati, this is one of the 10 places in the Torah where God uses the terminology, I will go down. The divine presence is revealed in this world, as it says by Mount Sinai. I will talk to you, but not with them. They will be there, Vatsalti, and I will then take the word Vatsalti, I will bestow that spirit, as it says in other places as well, to the Atzile, that meaning to the great and important people of the Jewish people, they did not come in contact with. I will place on them. What was Moshe compared to at that time? Linear, like a candle. That's sitting on a candelabra. Moshe was like this candle on the candelabra that everybody's using it to be able to create their fire, but the candle itself is not diminished. So too God says, I will take from you your holiness, your divine presence, and I will give from it to others, but yours will not be diminished. This was a condition. The condition that they will be able to receive that divine presence, that they should be able to deal and be involved with the different problems and issues that the Jewish people have. Because the Jewish people were known to be people who can bother their leaders with all different kinds of requests and not listen to what they're told. This is a response to what you said. You're not able to carry the load on your own. Here you go. They will be the ones to help you. And to the people you're going to say as follows: they should be sanctified for tomorrow. They will eat meat because they cried in the ears of God, lamer saying, who's going to give us meat? Because it was good for us while we were in Egypt. God is going to give you meat and you will eat. Why do they have to sanctify themselves? Meaning, get yourselves ready, for a punishment that's coming upon you because of this meat. So too it says in another place, using the word holiness, that a person in the book of Jeremiah, that you should sanctify yourself at the day of death, meaning that also a type of warning, recognition of what's coming. Verse 19, you're not only going to have meat for 1 day, and not only for 2 days, not for 5 days, not 10 days, and not for 20 days. Verse 20, but for a full month, you're going to have it so much it'll be coming out of your nose. You'll be nauseated from it. This is one of the places you see a common language that is taken from the Torah coming out of your nose. It's from this Torah reading. And because it'll be for you, it'll be nauseating for you. Yan them only because you have despised God. As Hashem God, Asher Bekirchem, that's amongst you. Vatifku levanov, and you cried, lamer, saying, Lama yatzanu Mitzrayim, why did we leave Egypt? Rashi at chodesh yamim, zu biksherim. This punishment is going to happen by the righteous people amongst them. Shalei mismatzim, that they won't go weakened al mitesayim on their beds for a month time. And only afterwards their soul is going to go out. However, by the people, by the evil ones, it says later on, the meat is going to be still between their teeth. That meaning that they're going to, that while they're still eating the meat, they're going to be killed. By the righteous ones, they'll have the meat and they won't die from it. This is what it means in the Sifri. In the Mechilta reads it the opposite way. The evil people, they're going to eat it and they're going to suffer for 30 days because of the meat that they ate. The righteous ones, they're going to have a simple death without any pain or suffering. So there's two opposite interpretations. One is that the righteous won't die at all, and that they'll go 30 days eating, but they won't die. The same, the other one, but however, the evil ones are going to die immediately by eating the meat. The other interpretation is that the evil ones will suffer for 30 days from eating the meat, and the other ones, the good ones, will die immediately without suffering. But you're going to be so disgusted by it. It's going to be feel that you ate so much of it that it's going to be coming out of your nose. And you're going to be nauseated by it. You're going to be so nauseated. When you're nauseated by something, you're nauseous from it, that instead of bringing it to you, you're going to keep on pushing it away, that you won't have a temptation to eat it anymore. Like Ramesha Darshan says, I've seen that people call the terminology cherev, meaning a sword that hurts you, they call it zera. So in this case, the meat is going to be for them like a death penalty type of thing. As Asher bekir bechem, im loisha netati shchinasi b'nechem legavel levavchem likonis lekol advarim eilu. That because if you would have God amongst you, meaning if you would have the very fact that I am amongst you and I've given you everything you need, the very fact that you had the ego to be able to say, oh, I'm asking meat and vegetables in the desert, is because you don't have God amongst you. You don't have that self-nullification. You don't have that humility. And that means what's causing you to ask and complain for such type of things is because you don't have that fear of God within you. Verse 21. Moshe said, there are 600,000 people on foot over here. Oh, that in whose midst I am in. And you're telling me, I'm going to give them meat, and they'll have enough to eat for a month. It's time. Even though there were technically more than 600,000 people, that was only men between 1 and 60. Or even then, there was 600,000 plus 3,000 as we saw the number. Moshe was not talking about the detailed, but he was talking about the general. From Moshe Hadarshan explains that actually, technically, yes, there were more people, but the ones that actually complained were only the 600,000 that came out of Egypt. 22. How can you possibly do this? A flock of herd that was slaughtered for them? Would that even be enough? Even if all the fish that were cooked for the sea, for them from the sea, would that even suffice them? Rashi. This is one of the 4 places where Rabbi Akiva gives a certain interpretation and his student from Shimon does not have the same interpretation, doesn't agree with him. Rabbi Akiva says this is what Moshe was saying. Meaning, 600,000 people amongst me, and you think I'm going to cut even if I slaughter all the flock, would that be enough for them? Meaning, Moshe was asking it simply, that's what it means. Mi maspik lahem. How are you going to be able to give such a whole nation? How is that going to be? King Shenemer Motza Geregu Losei. Ve'eza Akasha. Shimunu Amoirim. Moshe over here, Moshe was asking of God, how is it possible you're going to be able to do this? And Rashi answers the question, and it talks about, it says, later on, we find that Moshe uses a similar terminology, that how is it possible that this rock is going to give water? Why is it that by that case Moshe was punished, but over here Moshe wasn't punished for the words he said? He says, because in the case of the rock, Moshe said it out loud. Shimon Amorim, listen here, rebels, how can the rock give water? Over here it was between him and God, and therefore God did not punish him for what he said. Reb Shimon negates or disagrees with his teacher Rabbi Akiva. And he says, no, chas v'shalom, heaven forbid, heaven forbid to say that Moshe questioned God's abilities. One who says that, one who the Torah describes that in my whole house he trusted God, he's the most trusted servant of God, would question if God can even have the ability to give. This is what Moshe said. There's 600,000 of these people. And you said you're going to give them meat for a month time. And they're going to go kill such a nation. Are they worthy that you're going to give them? Why should you give them all this meat? That you should kill them afterwards. And you think that this meat is going to keep them satiated forever. Is this your praise? You tell a donkey, I'm giving you food and then I'm going to chop you off and then I'm going to kill you. God answers him. And if I'm not going to give them let's say that I don't have the ability to do it. That could be good for you. That they should think that God doesn't have the ability to do it. You better that like them and hundreds like them should die. That nobody should think that God doesn't have the ability to do something. So what we see from over here is the 2 opinions. Rabbi Akiva says that he was questioning God, meaning where's God going to get this meat from? Rabbi Shimon says impossible that he was questioning God. He was asking what's the point of giving them all this meat if you're going to kill them anyways afterwards. God said, I don't want them to think that I don't have the ability to do it. With this, Rashi continues, as we're soon going to see, that he continues the words of Rabbi Shimon, the rest of the explanation, as we get to verse 23. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, and God responds to Moshe. Hayad Hashem tikter. Do you think that God's hand is limited? Tasira, now you will see if my words, if what I happens says or not. In Rashi's continuation of the previous explanation, Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, says, you cannot stand on the secondary, that means you can't apply the secondary item. Meaning, because they're only requesting, they're making a libelous event, they could have went and slaughtered their animals. I shouldn't give it to them. Meaning that they will ultimately be judged and think about what you did and didn't give it to them. Just because they're making a libelous account, therefore you can allow yourself to allow to them to say, oh, you're not able to do it. And he explains, if you're going to give them good bull's meat, they'll say, we wanted lamb's meat. We want it from animal or bird's meat. We want fishing and grasshoppers. So therefore, therefore he says to him, they'll say, God says to Moshe, they'll say, I don't have the ability to do it. Omar lefanav. So he says, you know what, I'll go and appease them. Maybe they'll go back on their complaints. Omar loy. So therefore God says to Moshe, now you're going to go see if your words are true or not, because you're going to see they're not going to listen. Moshe went and tried to appease them. Omar lahem, he said to them, Hayad Hashem tikster, do you think God doesn't have the ability to do it? Look, the rock and water came out. To give you food. Amru, they answered, you're trying to get us to calm us down because God really can't answer our requests, and therefore they didn't accept what Moshe said. That's why the verse continues. Once they didn't listen, so therefore Moshe went back and gathered the 70 people because he saw they weren't listening. So over here, the conversation between God and Moshe, according to the second opinion, is where Moshe says, what's the point of it? God says, because I don't want them to think that God's hand is shortened. So Moshe says, 1 second, maybe I can go convince them and find out what they really want. Moshe says that God says they're not going to listen to you. As we see, Moshe tries and they don't listen. Verse 24. Moshe goes out and speaks to the people, and that's what we're referring to. That Moshe spoke to them, trying to appease them and trying to say that to see what was happening over here, and told the people that what God had said. And Vayesef Shivamish, he gathered the 70 elders, and they stood around the tent. Rashi, verse 25. And God came down in a cloud, and he spoke to them, and he elevated them. How? By taking al-sher alav, that from bestowing the spirit that was on Moshe and gave it to them. Vayitan al-shiva mish, and he gave it to the 70 people. Haskenim, the elders. And it was as the spirit rested upon them. Vayisnabu v'lo yisafu. They prophesied, but they did not continue afterwards the prophecy after that day. Rashi. V'lo yisafu. The only day that they prophesied was that day. The Unkelos explains that they didn't stop the prophecy, that actually from the first prophecy they didn't need any more bestowing from there. Verse 26. There were two people that were left in the camp. Shema Echad Eldad, one was Eldad, V'Shema Sheni Medad, and the second one, his name was Medad. Vatonach Aleim Haruach, and the divine presence rested upon them. Vehema Bakesuvim, and they were among the people that their names were mentioned. What that means is, we'll get to in a moment. V'Lo they did not leave, they did not go out of the tent. Vayisnabu b'machana, and they prophesied in the camp. What is it? From those 70 people, these two were there. Amru, they said, we are not worthy enough to be from the elders. What does it mean that they were from the ones that were written down? They were on the list of who should be appointed for the Sanhedrin. That means there was a list of 70 names, and they were from who are worthy of it. And Eldad Namedad was from the original list. They were all written down, names who should be chosen. Now they go through a lottery. Meaning that the lottery should go for the 12 tribes. Shisha l'chol shevet v'shevet. There were supposed to be 6 representatives for each tribe. Besides 2 of the tribes that only had 5. Because if you go 6 from 10 tribes comes out to 60. You have 70, which means 2 tribes are going to get only 70. Amar Moshe said, Ein shevet shemei li livches b'shifte zaken echad. It is not fair. How is it that every tribe is going to have 6, besides 2 should only have 5? That's not fair. Ma'asa, so what did he do? Natal ayin beis psakin. He took 72 notes. The chasav al shivim zaken. He wrote on 70 of them zaken that they should be an elder. Val shnaim chalik and 2 are empty. Ubeider mikol shevet v'shevet shisha. So he picked out from each one 6 papers. That's 72 total. Amar lahem, he said, take your paper out of the box. Whoever said it on this paper that you become holy, niskadish, became holy. Whoever got empty, that means that God doesn't want you. So you hand over here automatically minus 2 of them from whatever tribe, it was by a lottery. And the Torah is telling us that Eldad and Medad were from the 2 that were chosen. And the lad ran and he told Moshe. And he said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Who is the lad? Let's see. Some say Gershom that it was Gershom, the son of Moshe. And the reason why they think it's him, because since Yeshua is the one that responds, as we see in the next verse. Vayan Yeshua bin Nun. And Yeshua bin Nun answers, Mishadi is Moshe, the assistant of Moshe, Mi Bachurav, from his youth. And he says, Adoini Moshe, my master Moshe, Kloim, imprisoned them. Rashi, Kloim, Hatal Aleim Tzorchi Tzibur. You want them to be imprisoned, you want them to, you want them to dissipate from their great glory that they're now prophesying. Give them communal tasks. And they're going to be so busy with the communal tasks, they're not going to want anymore to be in charge, and automatically they won't be able to prophesy, because prophecy can only be by a person who's joyful. Another explanation was, put them in prison, because what they were prophesying was, Moshe is going to die, Yeshua Machnes, as Yisrael uttered, that Yeshua is going to be the one to bring them into the land of Israel, even though he knew it was for prophecy, but he felt that this was rebellion against Moshe, and therefore they should put him into prison. Moshe responded to Yeshua, are you zealous for my sake? If only God will make everybody Nevi'im prophets, that God should put his spirit of prophecy on all of them. 29. Are you here to fight my fights? Li, meaning because of me. The word kina comes to zealous when a person really dedicates himself to something to an extreme way. Or to take revenge, or to help. Impairment when a person gets really excited about something and really zealous. And therefore he takes hold into the difficulty of it, because since he wants to be able to make sure he's done, he takes it to an extreme way of taking care or of defending somebody else's honor. This concludes the 6th Torah reading of Parshas Beha'aloscha.